Hi, this is Jason Kanigan for Cold Star Tech's Make Space Boring. We are on a mission to normalize space and space manufacturing, sales of products and services made in space, and get the public using it and working in it the same way that they do with terrestrial stuff today. So yesterday I recorded with Jannene Kyytsonen, who's the founder of Space Habitats in Australia. Really interesting conversation. It was a little different than what I expected. She wants to build these biodomes and get people kind of simulating living in a space environment. Really the big surprise, by about halfway through I realized, oh, there's a whole area here that we haven't really been thinking about long-term effects of living in microgravity or on Mars or on the moon. Things happen to astronauts when they're in space for a year, and so they'll probably happen to us too, if we end up there. And also simple things like space tourism. Kind of made a joke in that podcast about travelers going to exotic places and then coming home and complaining about experiences that they had, like, oh, there were too many people at the beach, or I went to India and there was so much Indian food. Like, well, what do you expect, right? But this kind of thing is going to happen. There's going to be a more organized and I would say sensible, almost military organized type of person who's up there crewing these ships, say for space tourism. But the moment we get to something like a cruise ship in space, that mentality, right? There's going to be some goofballs up there, and you can't just get mad in space. It's not good to get angry in space and throw things, and you're in this very enclosed environment. So just little things like that, that in addition to how are people going to handle claustrophobia and the long-term vision problems that can happen. Your cornea can cloud apparently, and we all know about the muscle and spinal problems that can happen with long-term life in space. So that was really interesting. Look for that episode. We're so concentrated on the tech of space, I think, a lot of the time, about how are we going to get there, and then maybe what are we going to do, a little bit of the setup phase, but then what about that, right? What about after that? So yeah, look for that in a couple of months, I would imagine. There's quite a bit of lead time nowadays, as I've explained before, between when we record and when the episode comes out. Guillame Thirion, National Point of Contact for France for something called the Space Generation Advisory Council. This is a neat younger person's networking organization. And as soon as I find out about these things, I want the person on the show to talk about it, because social stuff is really interesting. And how are people networking? How does this even work? So he'll be on, and we'll be talking to him, I think, in May. It's quite a ways away. However, next week I will be recording with Daniel Britt and Richard Ward. Those are two names you probably know. All right, a quick note before I'm out of here. If you run a space company and you don't have sources of information that you trust in your company, that you're not really sure what's going on, probably need some more clarity, processes very likely not understood, and it's not just in space. Cold Star third-party process verification is a big service that we run. It's probably the most common service. We send out agents. They document your processes with you and demonstrate that you're doing what you say you're doing. Your people are doing what they say they're doing, which is often not the case. We find out that there's divergence between what they say they're doing and what they're actually doing. It's not because they want to be tricky or they're doing something wrong. There's usually some weird thing going on where Mary's afraid to go into Bob's office, and so she hands the inventory replenishment report to Fred and hopes that he drops it off in Bob's office. And there's a 2 or 3 day delay, in that's unnecessary, that holds up the entire supply chain, right? This kind of goofy thing is going on all the time, and a lot of people want to stick their heads in the sand. I got to say, one of the big qualifiers that I look for in bringing a client on is the desire of the client to be brutally self-honest and really look at things, because there's a lot of people out there who don't want to confront other people. They're afraid of conflict. They're afraid even of emotional stuff like sitting down and doing a performance review or getting a performance review and really getting honest feedback. We're all bad at something. And a lot of us are just not willing to acknowledge that, and that makes you not really a good fit for us. So if you are that kind of brutally self-honest business owner who truly wants to know really what's going on in my organization, what is actually happening, not what I believe is happening. We all have this fantasy of what's happening. And as a CEO, it's hard to get down to the grunt level, frontline level, where the rubber meets the road kind of activities and find out what is actually going on. We sit back as CEOs at this level of abstraction, looking at our reports and our pro forma income statements and trying to strategize out how we're going to meet that revenue target or that production goal. That's not always the best, you know, and so to achieve that knowledge of that clarity of what's actually going on in your business, it's probably a good idea to get a fresh pair of outside eyes, and that can come from Cold Star to come and look and verify what's actually happening, and not because we're not as emotionally invested. I think that's a big key. I mean, if you have a lawyer working on your behalf, let's say on something, they're not as emotionally invested as you are, or a purchasing agent, let's say. That's a service I'm considering offering, is helping out space companies with purchasing. There's probably a lot of, I'm not going to say deals, but conditions and like returns, or we bought this thing and it didn't work. It wasn't compatible with this other part that we wanted to use, and now what do we do with it? We've soldered it, so it's not really returnable, right? That kind of thing. There's stuff you can do beforehand before you get into that situation that will save you money and save you time. So anyway, that's a whole lot of stuff to be blathering on about, but that's it for me. Have a good weekend. I know it's not the weekend yet, but this is the last one for this week. End of the month tomorrow, and we'll be heading into, well, actually no, not true. It's a leap year this year, isn't it? Wow. These things, I don't really care about holidays and things like that, so these things sort of sneak up on me. It's just when the giant calendar on this huge monitor over here tells me, that's when I know. All right. Anything interesting sparks your interest, go to the coldstartech.com site. Have a look. You can book an appointment to speak with me on any one of those pages pretty much, and let's see what we can do. Thanks for watching.